Too strung out on compliments, overdosed on confidence. Started not to give a stop fearing the consequence. And they say I'm bad. Oh, I got it like that. What's up? We got the GOAT on the GOATs on the GOAT today, boys. I think we all need to take a minute to raise our teacups up to salute Reflex. Okay, I got a toast to make. Be quiet, I'm making a toast. Okay? Because Reflex is still to this day showing you other motocross games how it was done. Okay? It's still to this day showing Milestone how it should have been doing it. It's still to this day showing fucking MX versus ATV, the new MX versus ATV, what they should be doing. Okay? Still to this day, it's proving that these other modern day motocross games have no idea what the hell they're doing. So let's just give a little salute to Reflex, okay? I mean, just right off the bat, we had to get that out of the way. Okay, so I've been wanting to go in here and make this video for a minute now. You know, what made Reflex so great? Why is Reflex so amazing? What makes Reflex the GOAT? I think there's a lot of people that are kind of questioning that because it's been so long since we had Reflex. I think it's very easy for people to sort of get a little complacent. They kind of forget. It's easy to forget how good something was when it's, you know, you get another 11, 12 years down the line and it's like, oh, Reflex? Oh yeah, that one game that came out in like 2009, that's kind of crazy. You know, a lot of people I feel like have just sort of over time forgotten about how good it was for its time, but it was ahead of its time. That's the whole point. It's still just as good as it was back in 2009, even in this modern day motocross gaming world that we're in. It's still that amazing. You know, typically when a game comes out and then, you know, you get 10 years down the road, it's probably not going to still be the same amazing thing that it was 10 years before, but I swear to God, Reflex hasn't aged a day. It hasn't aged a day, dude. The physics, the track designs, the terrain deformation, I mean, all that stuff is still super relevant to today's motocross gaming, arcade motocross gaming world. Hell, it's even got better terrain deformation than any of those simulators have. So it's still that relevant. You know what I mean? Even though it's a game from 2009, it's still that relevant, which is just amazing. So I've been trying to think of the best way to quickly sum up why Reflex is so amazing. And what I'm talking about here is the 360 version of Reflex, the Xbox 360 version, because for whatever reason, the PC version just has that slightly different feeling to it. I say slightly, it's actually a little more than slightly. It's a pretty significant difference if you played a lot on the 360 version. You're going to get to the PC version and be like, whoa, why does this feel so different? But nonetheless, the PC version is still amazing in its own right because of all the custom content and the custom tracks. But I'm telling you right now, you don't want to sleep on that Xbox 360 version of Reflex because that's the real version of Reflex. That's the real what it was made for, you know? And then everything was kind of ported to where it could work on PC, and then the custom tracks and all that stuff. But anyways, here's the point of the video, okay? What makes Reflex so amazing, what makes it the greatest of all time arcade motocross game is everything just made sense, okay? Everything just makes sense on Reflex. That's it. That's all there is to this video. All right, I'm out, boys. Later, dudes. Oh, man. But for real, that's really all there is to it. Everything just made sense, dog. You know how you get in these newer motocross games and there's always at least one or two elements where you're just like, what the hell is that? Why does that look like that? Why does that look so goofy? You know, whether it's the animations or the track designs or the scaling or the physics or the content of these newer motocross games. You know, there's always some element to it where you're just sitting there scratching your head like, what are they doing with this? And there was absolutely none of that back in Reflex. There was just none of that. There was no element of when you were playing Reflex, you thought, man, why did they do this like that? Or why was this like that? There just is none of that. There is absolutely none of that. I mean, that's why it's so unbelievable. Everything just made sense. The animations on Reflex made sense. The stock track scaling just made sense on Reflex. It had the fun factor. It had the skill gap. It had the replayability. It wasn't trying to be so one-to-one scaling, right? And it had a good variety of stock tracks. It had some that had a little bit tighter scaling, and then it had some that had bigger scaling, had some that had big quad rhythms, had some that had more basic rhythms. It just had a little bit of everything with the track designs. But it all just made sense and made you want to just keep coming back and playing the game for infinity and beyond. That's what makes Reflex so amazing. It has that endless replayability feeling to it. I've not gotten that feeling in any other arcade motocross game since Reflex, period. And I mean, that's just the truth, man. That is just the truth. I can still go back and have more fun and replayability on Reflex than I can any other arcade motocross game that has come out after Reflex. It just all made sense, bro. Like how far you could overjump a jump without popping off, but you still could pop off. It just made perfect sense. The balance to the physics and how much you would crash compared to how much you wouldn't crash, and how easy it was to flip the bike over, but it wasn't too easy to pop off the bike. MXGP Pro, right? There's like all these little elements that were just done so perfectly. And this is another big thing right here. You're just not going to get another game that is as realistic, but then still in that arcade, feeling and realm of a dirt bike game as what Reflex is. You're just never going to get that. You can't get it any more than that. It's as realistic as you can make an arcade motocross game without starting to turn it, more into a simulator. It's as realistic as you can get it. It's just so hard to even explain it, dude. Just from the little snap, the difference from the snap scrubbing to the ground to how it feels throwing a whip, to how it feels doing a turn-up whip, to how it feels doing any variation of a whip, the freeness, but yet it's not too free. Everything just kind of makes logical sense for an arcade motocross game on MX versus ATV Reflex. Everything just made sense. It was so ahead of its time with the dual stick controls, and I feel like that's really what every motocross game is using now, is dual stick controls. The way you whipped on Reflex, that's what every motocross game is trying to replicate now. The terrain deformation just made sense on Reflex, okay? It had the perfect balance between cushiony feeling, but then also actually hardcore dig into the rut. You didn't just completely blow out every single rut on every track, right? It's just everything made sense. The terrain deformation made sense. The physics just made sense. The whip physics just made sense. The way that the air physics and the ground physics just worked perfectly in harmony. All of that just made sense. The customization, the tuning on the bikes just made sense. Everything about it, dude. Everything about it. The content just made sense. 3 full-blown, amazing, different biome freeride tracks. Okay. You had a Omnicross series in combination with the full Motocross and Supercross series, right? Then you had Omnicross, you had all the stuff for the trophy trucks and the UTVs and the ATVs. You had freestyle, you had the whole entire freestyle element to it. It still kept all of that cool ass shit. There's a lot of these modern motocross games that have just completely forgotten about freestyle and enduro. They've totally forgotten about all of that. Have you noticed that in some of these newer motocross games? There's barely any enduro content or omnicross or anything like that. And then there's barely any freestyle, free ride, any of that kind of shit, right? It's like, bruh, Reflex just had it had it all, dude. It just had a little bit of everything. The difference from the speed of the 125 to the 252 stroke. Oh, wait, there's been a bunch of these modern motocross games that didn't even have two strokes. Oh, wow, that's kind of funny, isn't it? MX vs. ATV Reflex had 125 two strokes, 252 strokes, 254 strokes, 454 strokes, and then it had all the stuff like the trophy trucks, UTVs, ATVs, all of that kind of stuff was all just, it all just made sense. The difference of how much better the 450 was from a 125 and everything about it. It just all made sense, bro. It just all made sense. But I guess what really made me stick with Reflex for so long is it's the gameplay part of it that makes the most sense to me, right? And the graphics are still comparable even to this day. I mean, yeah, they're not literally like a milestone game, but it doesn't look bad whenever you go back and play Reflex. It's not like, oh my God, this is like a PS1 game. I can't even play this. It's really not like that on Reflex, man. They did a pretty good job with the graphics. Even back for its time, it was right up there with the best graphic motocross games, of that era for sure, or any games of that era, really. But it's just like, it's like people actually cared about making Reflex as good as it could possibly be. It wasn't so money hungry, greedy. Let's just try to take your money. It's like the people actually cared about making an amazing motocross game. Isn't that crazy how we're like entered into this whole different universe of that seems to be the last thing on their mind is trying to make a solid, amazing, never-ending, replayable arcade motocross game. But really, let me try to hit this point home here at the end of the video, okay? What makes the most sense to me about Reflex is the gameplay. That's what it is, dog. Specifically on the Xbox 360 version, you just can't get anything else like it. It's so hard to... It's hard to even explain the feelings that you get on Reflex when you start taking it to that next speed level and you start hitting those jumps that you never thought was even possible. You start scrubbing that bike and literally dragging the handlebars. Fucking leg swag starts happening on the bike when you scrub that hard. It even had leg swag on the animations when you scrub a certain way. Like, bruh. Oh, man. Reflex was so ahead of its time, it's not even funny, dude. What it's done is it's basically diluted every other motocross game that has come out after it because of how ahead of its time it really was. It makes all these other motocross games that's come out after it just look so silly in comparison. It's just like, bro, Reflex has already laid out the foundation for you. It's already laid out everything you should do with an arcade motocross game. You should be trying to replicate the scaling and the skill gap and the jump sizes and everything that the way that it was on Reflex. You should be trying to replicate the physics of Reflex. You should be trying to replicate the whip system of Reflex and the content of Reflex and the terrain deformation of Reflex. You should be trying to get your game as close as you can get it to Reflex. There's just no question about it, bruh. No question about it at all. But that gameplay part of it is what really, it really keeps you invested in the game. It feels like you can always get a little bit better. Even if you've put 10,000 hours into it, feels like you can always learn a little bit of a new technique or tune your bike a certain different way or try out a different bike or try out a different kind of racing like Omnicross or, get into the custom track world of the PC version. It's like there's just endless fun. There's endless things to do in Reflex, and that's really what makes it what it is. There's endless things to do, but also the gameplay itself feels endless, right? So you get those two things combined, and it's like a magical utopia of arcade motocross gaming, It's like this fantasy land of arcade motocross gaming, and it's beyond me how funny that These certain motocross companies don't realize that Reflex has literally lasted a decade plus, and they can't even get their games to last more than 2 or 3 years. That's like at the maximum is what these newer motocross games are going to last, whereas Reflex lasted 10 plus years, dog. It's still going. It's still the best arcade motocross gaming experience you can have in this current day and age. Reflex is still the man. It's still the boss. It's still the big dog. It's still the big hoss. Don't even try to fuck with Reflex, boy. Don't even try, because you ain't even going to come close. It's just that good. That's why it's the GOAT.